there, chipmunks! Welcome to the AMP Cycling Ride Review Series. I'm your host, Angry Chipmunk, and today we're in the USA taking on the Moab Remote Triathlon. This route is available on Rouvy, so let's get right to it. This is a moderate length route at about 39 kilometers long with a decent amount of elevation at 744 meters. The whole ride averages just 2% and maxes out at 9.5%. The infographic will say it's only 9% as it doesn't do half percentages. There's only one Strava segment on Rouvy, but there are 6 on Strava itself. 3 of them are the full main 3 climbs, 2 are the partial climbs, and 1 is a downhill segment. I'll go through the climbs in order, skipping the downhill segment as it doesn't really count for anything. The first Strava segment is simply called 1. It's at the 0 kilometer mark, is 3 kilometers long with 142 meters of elevation gain, averaging 4.6% and peaking at 9.5% on Rouvy, with Strava being a bit more generous, peaking around 10.5%. Since Rouvy controls the emulation, this is what we'll go with, however. Strava considers this one to be a Cat 4 climb. This is a fairly straightforward and consistent climb for nearly the entire thing. It is going to mostly be in the 5 to 7% range for about 2 kilometers. It then backs off to 0 to 4% for around 300 meters before kicking back up for the last few hundred meters. I wouldn't say there's anything exceptionally difficult about this climb, except for the fact that it's immediately at the start of the route. The consistency of the climb makes it a nice one to push along pretty hard around FTP max. There's a nice flat downhill following it for about 4 kilometers, so plenty of time to recover if you do push uphill. There's another segment that is just the second half of the climb called Utah First Climb. The Rouvy included segment is Petrified Dunes Hill. It's at the 11 kilometer mark, is also 3 kilometers long with 129 meters of elevation gain, averaging 4.3%. The segment is also considered a Cat 4 climb. The first half of this segment is mostly in the 5 to 7% range, with the second half backing off to 4 to 5%, with the final few hundred meters backing off again to 2 to 3%. This segment is really only the second half of the climb. Because you've been on positive gradient for about 4 kilometers already, this one is easy to just push up harder or continue at the pace you've been doing all along, as the first half is quite mild. The first half is pretty much mostly in that 2 to 4% range, peaking at 6%. The full climb is called 2. It starts at the 7 kilometer mark, is 7.3 kilometers long with 269 meters of elevation gain, averaging 3.6%. From about the 15 to 25 kilometer mark, there are several small uphill-downhill combos. Around 20 kilometers in, the camera car turns around, so you end up doing the same hills again, just in reverse. The ups are all quite similar, with the gradients around 5 to 7% for the most part, and they're all quite short. The trickiest part of this section is getting the gear changes right, as the hills don't spend a lot of time in the flat before changing to the next up or down. Be sure to watch carefully to time your gear changes. These kinds of hills can be trickier and harder than they appear, so don't underestimate this section. The final Strava segment is 5. It's at the 32 kilometer mark, is 4.3 kilometers long with 132 meters of elevation gain, averaging 3%. Strava also considers this one to be a Cat 4 climb. There's a massive nearly 7 kilometers of descent before you get to this climb, so you should be able to come into this one pretty hot and carry a lot of speed at the start. The first half is very mild, about 2 to 4%. It isn't until 2 kilometers into the climb that you see the gradients jump to around 5 to 7% for a few hundred meters. To the end, you'll again see mostly 2 to 4%. And even though it's nearing the end of the ride, this is a great one to push pretty hard. The last nearly 3 kilometers is descent to the finish line, which is also the very first hill that you climb. For this ride, you'll be needing a very good warm-up. The first hill actually starts on about 6%, so 10 to 15 minutes of warm-up is ideal here. The ending few kilometers are downhill, so you can get away with a lesser cooldown if you spin that last bit pretty easily. It's a fun push though, so be sure to cool down for your effort if you push to the end. And as always, I recommend pre-fueling your ride and including plenty of protein with that. This is especially true here where you are climbing from kilometer 0. There's not an obscene amount of elevation gain, so you could just have a bar or something in the start of your warm-up if pre-fueling isn't possible. I would aim for about 20 grams here. The middle section of this route, being the hilly plateau, makes it a bit more challenging to fuel, but at 40 kilometers, I would suggest fueling again halfway anyway. Aim for another 20 grams or so, somewhere around the middle, and that should be good for the rest of the ride. I would definitely follow this one up with a protein of some sort and a magnesium supplement. The view here is pretty crazy. Utah has those incredible rock formations that are pretty neat. Sometimes they seem to go on forever and make you feel very small. They are great to look at, but it can feel a bit samey after a while. And for most of this route, you see it twice as it's a there and back. The sky looks like it hasn't seen a cloud in about 60 years, which contrasts really well with the orange rocks. Sometimes there are snow-capped mountains in the background, which are always a personal favorite. A moderate pace saw me complete this ride in 1.5 hours on 100% difficulty emulation. With needing a good warm-up but moderate cooldown, I would say to budget anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours. It's not a great choice for those with time restrictions. If you can't complete it all in one go, stopping when the camera car turns around is possible, as it's a fairly moderate spot in the route. Overall, this is a fun route that I would definitely recommend for any moderately experienced rider and up. There's a decent amount of climbing, so not really a great choice as a recovery route despite not being that difficult. The elevation gain is spread pretty evenly throughout the ride though, so if you're wanting to tackle more elevation gain without it being all bunched into one mountain pass, this route is a great choice. For this route, I gave a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed this route, but I would have preferred not to start mid-hill. It was really just not that much fun. It also would have been nice if they were able to get all 40 kilometers as one pass instead of having to turn around. For the climbs, 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, and 3 out of 5. None of them are really that steep or difficult. The first is harder due to its starting position. These climbs are all very doable for any moderately experienced rider. For the view, 4 out of 5. I love the big rock formations here. They sometimes feel like they go on forever. The colors are all very vibrant and really pop off the screen. My only dislike is having to see the same view twice. And overall, 4.5 out of 5. Definitely put this one in your ride queue. Perfect for those days when you want a moderate challenge or if you just want to up your elevation gains. Well, that's it for this review, so thanks for watching, Chipmunks. Please let me know what you think of the Moab Triathlon route when you complete it. I'll leave you to finish the rest of the ride, and I'll see you next week for another review. Until then, ride on, Chipmunks, ride on.
He was.